Chapter 14 Activation. The energy flare from the explosion of the Ogron ship sent needles kicking crazily across their scales on the consoles in the survey room. The doctor, still uncomfortably attached to his chair, took a look at the base computer's diagnostic reports as the readings settled. It looked as if Charlie and his servants had met with an unpleasant end. The doctor would have taken his hat off to mark his respect, but it was still in his pocket, and it would have been too much trouble to take it out, put it on, and then take it off again, particularly in his current circumstances. He flipped open the communicator channel. "Spigot," he called. "Spigot, can you hear me? It's the doctor." The static-coated atmosphere of the planet had been further tainted by the explosion, and the reply frequency was blocked by a quivering sonic howl. What to do? The doctor looked about him. Firstly, he could have a go at disarming the bomb. The signal would never be sent, but the thing had an antique appearance to it that was deeply unsettling. It might go off at any moment. He hopped over to it, whipped out his sonic screwdriver, and set to work. Zaya sensed the destruction of the ship. She looked up at the gallery. Pierpoint's body was slumped over the console. He was covered in his own blood. The injuries must have been fatal. Zayas took a deep breath. At last, the situation was back under her control. The Nisbets and Pierpoint were dead, and the latter had been foolish enough both to free her and to provide her with the Helicon, ready-mined and ripe for activation. "Now," she whispered. Her eyes snapped open. The glow had already started to form. "Time to begin." A mental image came to her. She saw herself standing in the middle of a burning city. Coppertown, perhaps. The air was rich with the satisfying odor of charred corpses. Death was all around her. The normals were burning in their own filth. She had sterilized the area. Soon. Zayas left the room where she had been imprisoned and walked briskly along the corridor outside. She could feel the Helicon gathered and waiting, calling to her. Her flesh tingled. Stokes tapped the door of the TARDIS. "We appear to have evaded death once again," he said. "If this unlikely contraption can do half of what you claim for it, Spigot, I suggest we make ourselves scarce." "Hang on a moment." Spigot peered through the entrance of the repair bay. "She's coming this way." He readied his revolver as the sound of hurried footsteps came closer. K9 motored forward, eagerly.
"That is the mistress."
"Don't, K9," Spigot warned. "You've got to forget about Romana. There's nothing much we can do for her now." He raised his blaster. "This way may be the kindest." K9's laser shot the weapon from Spigot's hand. Without a word, the automaton shot past the startled policeman and into the corridor outside. Zayas stopped at the sight of him. "Ah," she crowed, "the dog. Your mistress is very fond of you. So stupid, the obsession of normals with inanimate objects." K9 growled. The venomous features of the mask contrasted oddly with Romana's flowing blonde hair and stylish outfit.
"Release my mistress, Zayas."
"Get out of my way," Zayas said. She opened her eyes wide and prepared to deliver the burst of energy that would crush the small machine into a smoking heap of sticky components. Something stopped her. She gasped and clutched her stomach. Her head jerked back at an odd angle. The voice of Romana shouted out suddenly, "K9! Find the doctor! Find him!" She doubled up. Zayas reasserted herself and Romana's body straightened. She pushed past K9 with an angry scream and ran down the corridor. K9 followed her. Spigot, who had overseen this exchange from the doorway, emerged into the corridor. Although he was now without a weapon, he was determined to see this case, the most baffling of his career, through to the end. He set off after K9. Stokes hung back. He looked longingly at the TARDIS. "Why don't I?" he told himself. "Just wait in there." He squinted to read the notice on the door of the time spacecraft. "Pull to open. Right." He grasped the handle on the right-hand door and pulled. The door refused to budge. "I knew that was going to happen," said Stokes. "Oh well." He hurried out of the repair bay. Gently, the doctor eased out the last of the thin red rods that formed the core of the bomb. He returned the sonic screwdriver to the pocket of his jacket and exchanged it for a somewhat battered paper bag of jelly babies. With difficulty, he popped a yellow one into his mouth and chewed to aid his concentration. The outlook was bleak. "Well, Doctor," he told himself, "you're stranded in a survey base away from the action, you've lost Romana, K9, and the TARDIS, and your only means of escape is to walk across 200 miles of sludge in an Atmos suit that'll increase your body weight threefold. Shouldn't take you a week. Landed, stranded, diddled, dished, and done." The sugar released by the now chewed jelly baby raced through the doctor's metabolism to where it was most needed. Instantly, inspiration came. "Ah!" he cried. "Now, what about the transmat?" With renewed enthusiasm, he hopped out of the survey room. In the gallery above the room where he had imprisoned Zeus, Pierpoint stirred. He was covered in shards of glass that tinkled off as he righted himself. His left arm flopped, broken and limp, at his side. He fought down the pain and stood up, grunting with exertion. His head throbbed, and blood smeared the left side of his face where the sharp point of a fragment of glass had opened his forehead, but these appeared to be his only injuries. He felt for the laser pistol tucked into his waistband and staggered out of the room. The hum of active machinery led Zeus to the mineral stores. The end of the corridor widened out to form a small, brightly lit chamber. One wall was white and featureless. The other was lined with about 30 small storage hoppers arranged in 3 stories. Each hopper had a clear panel at the front. Each container was filled almost to capacity with silver dust. Raw helicon, sucked from the mountains and the surrounding rocks and pools by robots and bugs, and sifted clear into the hoppers by automated shakers. Zeus let out a moan of ecstasy. She crossed to the nearest hopper and leant her head against it. She could hear the helicon inside calling to her. The itch in her forehead returned and her eyes reddened. The time was approaching. The problem of how to flee this planet afterwards remained, but she knew she would find a way. And in just a few hours, the activation process would be complete. Every last molecule of the helicon stored here would be infused with her life force. She could shape it however she chose. Then would begin her revenge on the normals. She reached out for the environment control panel next to the storage computer and instructed the hoppers to decrease their internal temperature by hundreds of degrees. The computer reported that the helicon would reach liquid point in 6 minutes.
"Mistress,"
An irritating tiny voice called from behind her. She turned from the hoppers to see K9 and the 2 normals approaching. She was amused to see that one of them was the cowardly artist from the rock. "Stokes, it is fitting that you should be here at this moment in history." "No, it bloody isn't," Stokes said. Zeus ignored him. "I may need you to shape the pattern for a new body." She raised a hand to her mask. It responded to her touch, molding itself under her fingertips like wet clay. "My skills with this substance are improving. I am starting to wonder if there is anything I cannot achieve, given time." Spigot put his hands on his hips. "Come on, Zeus. The game's over. You'd best come quietly." "Idiot." Again she tried to send a beam of energy towards them, and again failed. The host was blocking her, conserving its energies for moments of stress in a skilled way that Margo never had. Frustrated, Zeus reached for a control on the wall beside her. With a solid clunk, a massive shield slid down across the entrance to the storage chamber. K9 darted forward, but it was too late. Zaius nodded, relieved, and returned her attentions to the Helicon. Bubbles were forming already at the bottoms of some of the containers. Spigot slammed the flat of his hand against the shield, howled, and sucked his fingers. "She's got us licked." Stokes asked, nervously, "What exactly is she doing in there?" K9 answered,
My sensors indicate that she is lowering the temperature of the inert helicon in order to effect a chemical change in its constitution. This change will render it suitable for activation by the...
He clicked in Word, searching his vocabulary.
radiation that she is able to release.
"So what are we going to do about it then?" cried Spigot. "Stand here talking about it?" He collapsed against the wall. "There's nothing we can do." K9 inspected the shield, separating them from Zaius.
Negative. This shield is composed of steel. My laser can penetrate.
He extended his nose laser and started to cut away. The beam moved with frustrating slowness. To Spigot, it seemed as if the ray was having no effect at all. Back at the McConaughey mining base, the doctor completed his one-handed adjustments to the transmat. He hoped to divert the beam in the direction of Pierpoint's mine. He observed. "Direct non-terminal transmat travels a good few centuries ahead of this lot. If they only knew it was a simple matter of cross-hatching the Pentalion drive with the guidance assemblers and adding a verification tangle after the 77th pulse. But people never can see the obvious." He flipped up the transmat timer controls, set the beam to activate in 15 seconds, and hopped enthusiastically onto the transmission platform. A dreadful doubt entered the doctor's mind. "I hope I remembered to step up the scale on the proton screen. It would be very undignified to be stuck to this chair for the rest of my days. Still, too late to check now." He felt the familiar tugging sensation of transmat travel and the warble of the disassemblers. He shrugged his shoulders. Oh, that this too solid flesh would melt, and was gone. Stokes tugged at Spigot's sleeve. "Why don't we just go back to that TARDIS?" He gestured to K9. "He hardly seems to be having much luck on the shield. As you say, we're finished here. There's nothing we can do." "You're right." Spigot knelt to address K9. "We've got to evacuate. Let's go back to your box, right?"
Negative. I must rescue the mistress.
Spigot tapped him on the head. "You know that's dumb, but me and Stokes are getting out of here,"
Impossible.
said K9.
The door of the TARDIS is locked, and if I were to open it, you would not be able to operate the systems.
Spigot frowned. "You're coming back with us, K9. That's an order."
I am not programmed to accept your orders.
"The robot revolution has come at last," said Stokes. "And of course I have to be right in the middle of it." He crossed to K9 and shouted down. "I hope you rust!" "That's no way to address my dog," said a voice from behind them. Spigot and Stokes whirled around. K9 clipped off his beam and swung out joyously.
Master.
The doctor nodded a greeting. "Hello, K9. Hello, Mr. Stokes." He turned his most withering look on Spigot. "Hello, cretin. Ruined any good plans lately?" "Now, come on. That was hardly my fault," Spigot protested. The doctor waved him into silence and crossed to the shield.
The mistress is behind this barrier, Master.
K9 informed him.
She is possessed by Zaius. I am endeavoring to break open the shield before she can activate the helicon.
"Good dog. You carry on." The doctor looked about. On the wall to the left of the shield was a small microphone. He reached up with his free hand and unclipped it. "Here, doctor," said Spigot. "You're tied to a chair, you know." The doctor ignored him and switched on the microphone. The helicon was starting to reach activation point. A gentle percussion of freezing bubbles against glass filled the storage chamber. Zaius smiled. Her eyes opened. They were now a vivid blue. Her concentration was absolute. In just a few moments, she would begin the process. An amplified cough disturbed her serenity. Hello? Testing. 1, 2, 3. Her mouth twisted. Doctor. Hello, said the friendly voice. That sounds like Romana. How are you, old thing? Your attempt to reach her is futile, Doctor, said Zeus. I have total control. When the doctor's voice spoke again, it was with considerably more gravity. Zeus, listen to me. I know you have endured much. Your entire people were wiped out. I do not want your sympathy, she called back. You are a normal. Your words mean nothing. Well, at least do this for me, Zeus, if you can. Use Romana's skills to work out the likely consequences of your actions. Can you control so much of that stuff? I doubt it. Even if you can, what then? There's no way you can leave this planet, Zeus. Your escape route is gone. You'll be trapped here forever. At a junction not far away, Pierpoint stood, nursing his broken arm. His blood-soaked face was turned to a screen built into the wall. It displayed the interior of the storage chamber. Pierpoint shook with delight, remembering the plans of the mine passed to him by its designer, his former accomplice, Volt. Zeus was exactly where he wanted her. He could still triumph. He licked his lips and hurried toward the storage chamber, gun in hand. The doctor looked anxiously down to where K9 had almost blasted through the shield. The hastily improvised plan he was about to put into action was gambling all their lives, but he could see no alternative. Here's the deal, Zeus, he said. You give me Romana unharmed. I'll give you another host and transportation off this planet in my ship, the TARDIS. I'll take you out of this system. And don't imagine you'll be able to kill us and leave in the TARDIS. You'd never be able to operate it. It contains a field that nullifies all hostile action. Ask Romana to verify that. A few seconds passed as Zeus considered.
It is so, but these terms are not good enough, Doctor. You must take the Helicon also.
The doctor licked his lips. He had anticipated this request and deliberately not mentioned the Helicon in his offer, so that he would now appear to be giving ground. Very well, he said with feigned reluctance. We'll load it aboard.
And my new host form,
Zeus continued.
I want you, Doctor, to wear my face. That way, I will know there will be no tricks on your part. Is that agreed?
The doctor, surprised, clicked off the microphone and thought over the stipulation. You can't do it, Doctor, said Spigot. Let me be the host. I reckon I could show Zeus a thing or two. I've been programmed to resist brainwashing. You haven't a brain to wash, said Stokes. The doctor reopened the channel. All right, Zeus. I'll give myself as host. Until we reach the planet of your choice. He paused. Now, why don't you open the shield and we can begin? Before Zeus could reply, a high-pitched squawk came from behind the doctor. He turned to see Stokes, who was held in an arm lock by Pierpoint. The thin end of a laser pistol had been jammed against the artist's flabby neck. Don't move, Doctor, Pierpoint warned, or I'll kill him. Oh God, oh God, oh no, oh no, Stokes wailed. Shut up, Pierpoint ordered him, jabbing him with the pistol to underline his point. It looked as if Spigot might be about to jump Pierpoint, so the doctor pulled him back hurriedly. What do you want exactly? He asked. What I've always wanted, Pierpoint replied. A return to decency and social order. Stokes yelped again. Pardon me for saying so, but you've got a very funny way about that, said the doctor. You are a symptom of the social malaise, Doctor. You would not understand. It was necessary for somebody to take a stand. If I had not become Sentinel, the law would have crumbled and crime would have run amok. He tightened his grip on Stokes. Permissiveness and license have allowed degenerates like this repulsive creature to flourish. With Helicon, key to my personality, I intend to return this system to order. Forever. A crazed glint had entered his eyes. I am the natural leader.
Without me, our society will turn to dust in less than a generation, I promise you. I will have, ultimate eternal control if we are to survive."
"I thought it would be something like that," said the doctor. "Unfortunately, I fear you are laboring under a massive misapprehension." He inclined his head slightly. "You see, I've given it some thought, and I don't think Helicon can be used by anybody but Zeus. She can't work some formula on your behalf. That would be quite impossible. The transfer process is based on her personality, her soul, if you like, traveling along a telepathic wavelength. Unless you share her psi powers, such a transfer would be impossible to duplicate."
"You're bluffing,"
said Pierpoint.
"Zeus demonstrated the process for me 4 years ago. At our first meeting, she activated Helicon and gave it my personality. I spoke to myself."
The voice of Zeus came from the microphone, still clutched in the doctor's hand.
"The doctor tells the truth, Pierpoint. The demonstration was fate. There is no formula to recreate the process."
Pierpoint released Stokes, who fell panting to the floor, red-faced. He grabbed the microphone from the doctor and yelled into it.
"No, Zeus! I spoke to myself!"
"You spoke to a computer projection,"
she replied.
"You were so easy to manipulate, so desperate to believe. In the end, whatever you planned, I knew I could always better you. You are a normal."
Pierpoint's legs shook.
This is...
The doctor put a restraining hand on his shoulder. "Steady on, old chap." Pierpoint knocked the doctor aside and spoke into the microphone.
"Sentinel,"
he said, his eyes were rolling.
"Activate! Destroy intruders!"
Zeus turned as a clicking noise came from the white wall behind her. An entire section of it slid out slowly. The white block unfolded with incredible speed. Its appendages, a long, vibrating knife, a whirring saw, and a spiked mace at the end of a chain, were revealed at the same time as the circular base inflated and detached itself from the wall. The huge mining robot bore down on Zeus. She was startled for a second, but the speed of her reflexes allowed her to duck under the nearest block as it crashed into the hopper behind her. The robot turned to finish her off, but she rolled herself nimbly under it. She stood, facing the hoppers. The Helicon inside was now ready for activation. This could be her only chance. The robot whirred and turned, struggling to orientate itself. Zeus gathered all her energies. She closed her eyes, concentrated, and then opened them again. A glittering yellow haze cascaded from her eyes like a shower of golden stars. The energy cloud was attracted to the Helicon and slipped through the glass fronts of the hoppers. The reaction was immediate. The Helicon roared. Zeus screamed with pleasure. Disorientated, the robot's center swung from the hoppers back to Zeus. It advanced again, extending its vibrating knife with a view to impaling her. Zeus backed away and stumbled into a corner. In her exultation, she dismissed the deal she had made with the doctor. What did it matter now that her own existence was absolute and indelible? This host was unimportant anyway. There were other normals to be used nearby. Pierpoint would be a fitting host. Romana had been conserving her energies. With an enormous effort of will, she forced Zeus to raise her hand and throw off the mask, and suddenly found herself pressed into a corner with a robot bearing down on her. She took advantage of its lumbering movements to slip around its side. She was tired and disorientated, but she realized instantly that she had no time to collect her wits. The robot turned again, its mace swinging for her and missing her by inches. The temperature gauges on the hoppers shattered with successive tinkles of glass. Freezing steam poured from emergency vents, almost blinding her and confusing the robot. K9 had almost cut through the shield. The doctor, now freed from the chair, paced up and down, desperate to know what was going on the other side. The microphone had relayed a confusing variety of sounds. "Come on, K9, come on!" Estimate success in 24 seconds, said K9. The red ray was now angled downward, carving out the outline of a man-sized arch. Pierpoint was slumped against a wall, giggling to himself.
I will have control soon,
he said.
Helicon will give me control.
Stokes, who had picked himself up and dusted himself down, huffed. Madman! The ground started to shake and the lights flickered. What the hell is going on behind there? Cried Spigot. K9 shot back from the shield as the section he had carved out fell backwards into the corridor with a clang that all but deafened the doctor, who was standing closest. A cloud of dust and smoke was released from the storage chamber beyond. Romana! The doctor covered his nose and mouth with the ends of his scarf and leapt through the hole. Romana staggered into his arms and he pulled her back. Pierpoint brushed past them. He dashed into the storage chamber and looked about at the hoppers. Each of them looked as if it was about to burst open and release the straining helicon inside. The robot, thoroughly confused, was spinning around wildly.
Zeus!
Cried Pierpoint.
Zeus!
He strayed too near a steam vent and scalded his good hand, which dropped the laser pistol. He screamed.
I am here,
said the voice of Zeus.
I am here, Pierpoint.
His foot touched something. It was the mask. The lips moved.
Pierpoint, you must wear my face. Wear it. I will give you the activation formula. I was lying to the doctor, of course.
Pierpoint, desperate to believe, picked up the mask. Slowly, he brought it down on his face. In the moment that followed, Zeus and Pierpoint exchanged the horror and the sickness of their personalities. Each struggled to take control. The robot advanced and pushed its vibrating knife up through Pierpoint's ribcage. He coughed and choked. The robot withdrew and ambled off. Pierpoint's body collapsed. The mask clung on, its host's blood dribbling through its lips.
No!
It cried.
No, Pierpoint! You must not die! You cannot die! I need you! You are to be my new host. Without a living mind, I cannot stabilize the Helicon. You must live!
He died. Zeus felt his soul recede and then disappear.
No!
She cried.
Doctor! Doctor, help me! You must help me, Doctor!
The robot lurched through the gap in the shield and advanced on the doctor. He bundled Romana into Stokes' arms and shouted, K9! The dog rolled forward slowly.
Reserves exhausted, master.
He ground to a halt.
Oh dear,
said the doctor. The robot's whirring saw slashed out, slicing one of the ends of the doctor's scarf. Spigot dashed forward. He lunged for the concealed control panel under the robot's flailing arms and fumbled for the activation button. The saw halted an inch from the doctor's face. He stepped around it cautiously and shook Spigot's hand.
Do you know, he told the policeman, I think your entire life has been leading up to that moment.
Doctor!
Zeus called from the storage chamber. The doctor shook himself, nipped through the hole in the shield again, and answered his enemy. He had to shout over the rumble of the Helicon. Yes? The mask, still attached to the dead body of Pierpoint, pleaded with him.
Please, Doctor, you must wear my face. I was able only to activate the Helicon, to prepare it. I need a host to complete the transfer. The Helicon is dangerous, aware but mindless. Without my direction, it will consume the planet.
I'm sorry, Zeus. If I gave you what you ask, I condemn millions of innocent people to suffering.
You will obey me,
shrieked the mask.
I order you. I will consume you! You will wear my face, Doctor!
Romana came to stand beside the doctor. We'd better leave, Doctor. I know. He took one final look at the hate-filled features of the snarling mask and followed Romana through the shield.
Then die, Doctor!
Zeus called after him.
Die! The Helicon will consume you, but I shall live forever!
The hoppers exploded. The TARDIS, now! Cried the doctor. He picked up the inert K9 and set off down the corridor at a furious pace. Spigot hurried after him, with Romana and Stokes bringing up the rear. A wave of expanding silver burst from the hoppers, filling the storage chamber and swallowing up the robot, the body of Pierpoint, and the protesting mask of Zeus in seconds. It flowed down the corridor and into the mine, roaring and moaning, a formless mask, sentient but with no soul. Guided by a powerful homing instinct, the doctor bounded into the repair bay. Spigot, Stokes, and Romana followed seconds later. The mine vibrated as the roaring tide of expanding Helicon poured along its corridors. The doctor was ferreting in his pocket with his free hand. "Come on, Doctor!" cried Romana. "Let us in!"
"I can't find the key," he shouted back. "And we can't use K9, he's dead to the world."
The Helicon swallowed up the corridor outside the repair bay.
"When we were interrogated back up on the rock," the doctor said desperately, "I didn't leave it up there, did I?"
"No," said Romana as coolly as she could. "I remember you picking it up." Spigot pounded his fists on the door of the TARDIS. "Let us in! Let us in!" Stokes glanced over his shoulder.
"Oh, no!"
The Helicon was flowing into the repair bay.
"Got it!"
The doctor held the key aloft. He jammed it in the lock, opened the door, and pushed the others inside. He waved at the gushing Helicon.
"Goodbye!"
Then he threw himself inside the TARDIS. A moment later, it dematerialized. The Helicon consumed the repair bay and went on to swallow the mine. Unsated, it burst open the walls, confining it, and splashed out onto the surface of Planet 11. It spread in all directions at unbelievable speed. The highest peaks of the Gilharo mountain range were buried in less than 5 minutes. The gobbling mass continued to expand, absorbing the thick gases in the atmosphere, seeping down and damping its tiny core, and covering the surface of the small planet.